What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, and today it's kind of a sad day because we come to the end of the third and final leg of the Summer Fall 1974 Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention tour. My favorite tour from Frank Zappa. Probably my favorite leg of my favorite tour, but collectively, overall, I think Frank's best band, his best outing, my favorite selection of songs, some of my favorite guitar solos. And we essentially come here to the end of the ROXY era. After this, we get that weird little Bongo Fury tour, which is like a little bit ROXY, a little bit Beefheart, a little bit looking forward to sort of the late 70s arena rock vibe that Frank would bring. So yeah, we got two shows here. I'm going to talk about these two shows, not going to play any music from these two shows, and then I'm going to rank these two shows among all the other shows that we have available out there in the tape trading community on the internet that have been officially released from this third leg of the 74 tour. Then next week, we'll start a new tour. It's going to be a short one. We've got a short one coming up. And then after that, open for suggestions, but don't suggest 1982 because we're going to save 1982 for a while because that's another truly, truly epic tour. We're going to try to drop the epic tours every so often between some not so epic tours, but I'm open to suggestions. But anyways, two shows. The first show we're going to talk about is 12/3/74. Sort of the official last show before the New Year show, which is the second show. And the problem with both these shows, and it all makes them both almost unlistenable, is the sound quality is rough. Like this show, this Cleveland show, there are moments where I'm like, wow, that guitar solo sounds like it's probably fantastic, but I really can't hear it. So it's a tape I will probably not revisit just because the sound is really rough. And there's some really cool things in here. And there's even a solo in here. I'm like, wow, I know that's a fantastic solo, but I'm still not going to go back and re-listen to it because the sound is just, it's rough. It's one of the, maybe other than the very first show I think that I did, one of the worst sounding tapes we have available from this part of the tour. Set list wise, we get a Tush, we get a Stinkfoot that sounds like Frank's digging in, sounds like he's got some good ideas, sounds like there's some cool stuff happening. This is the last show with Birdlegs on bass. He would play guitar on the New Year show, but Fowler's still not here. We got a Redunzel. Seems like there's an Inca quote in here. Seems like he's playing with some Inca Roads energy in the solo. It's starts off focused. There's kind of a solid motif that he's playing with. It's kind of patient and melodic with nice bursts of energy. After about 2.5 minutes, he kind of ups the intensity and things get a little more crazy. But it's a rough listen. It's just the sound is pretty bad. We get the Village, a Kindergarten, Don't You Ever Wash sequence. The Village seems pretty fast. It seems like it's a little more dun, 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 dun. We got a lot of energy in that Village. In the middle of the drum solo that comes at the end of Don't You Ever Wash That Thing, there's this little like 20 to 30 second musical insert that sounds like it's a cover of like a classic, like a song that the 60s mothers would have dropped into like a chaotic jam, some like, B-side to some like single that Zappa heard at some point when he was a teenager. That's what it kind of sounds like, something the mothers would have dropped in the 60s. Kind of cool. Then we get a Penguin in Bondage that's pretty aggressive sounding. The solo sound is absolutely horrible. We get a Tamershi Dog Meat Girl. We get a Dynamo Hum. We get a Camarillo Brillo. We get a fantastic Montana Duke sequence. The Montana is aggressive from the beginning. All of Frank's playing is pretty aggressive tonight. Frank is focused. He's off. He's exploring. There's a little bit of the 74 weirdness starts to seep in which the rhythm kind of feels like it's about to fall apart, but never does. Frank kind of slows the solo down at one point to kind of rebuild it back up. It sounds like it's an absolutely amazing guitar solo, like the little bits and pieces that I can make out. But it's just a hard listen on the ears. Then we get a George thing, hitting his finger, which is a stupid sort of thing to do, Frank says. Get a reference to 1966 for some reason. Get a lot of Cleveland jokes. A lot of Frank talking in this part with like sort of burst of George between it. It's kind of a frustrating listen because the mix is you're really struggling to make out what Frank is saying. You're really struggling to figure out what's going on. Some nice synth energy in there, really nice long percussion jam. And then when Ruth is doing her percussion solo, she starts playing the opening riff to Eat That Question. And then they go in to Eat That Question. And then the tape cuts. And we don't know if Eat That Question gets a full-blown performance, whether it's just a tease. Who knows? We don't. I don't. Was someone at the show? Anybody? But yeah, it's unlistenable. Like it's rough. Yeah, that's the 12/3/74 show. It's if it were to be officially released, just based on what we have, I think it would probably be fantastic. The sound almost sounds like, because it's in Cleveland, I thought of Spinal Tap. It's almost as if the opening band in Spinal Tap was playing, and as Spinal Tap is wandering around whatever the basement that they were in trying to find the stage, and they get lost and they run into that custodian, and like it would be like what the band that was playing on stage sounded like while they're standing in the basement. Or, and this is probably more relatable to most people, if you go to like an arena show where you have to go to the concourse to like buy food, and and the concourse has those concrete hallways that separate you from like the main area, but the sound still seeps through and you're standing in line to buy a beer, that's what the sound sounds like. You're like, oh, what are they playing? Oh yeah, I think that's Penguin in Bondage. Yeah, all right. Yeah, it's not good sound. Yeah, 12/3/74. And then the last show we have from this tour, the last show of this era, we get our last Redunzel until the 80s. We get our last Dres Paradise till 88. Get our last Pygmy Twilight. Just some sad stuff happening here. We also get a couple new songs. This is the New Year show, Long Beach, California, 12/31/74. Also not very good sound, also frustrating sound. There was a lot of bad sounding shows from early in the tour where at least like the guitar is mixed really high. So anytime there's a solo, you're at least able to really hone in and appreciate the solo after you've suffered through everything else. This one, you just kind of suffer through everything else. And you can tell these are fantastic solos, but it's just like a lot of it's like, oh, it sounds like that's a cool run. It sounds like George is doing some cool stuff. Chester sounds like he's doing some cool stuff, but you're really just guessing at it. The show starts after New Year's or right at New Year's. So the tush, 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 they do Stinkfoot, and then it's New Year's and they play Auld Lang Syne. And Frank is trying to get a snow machine to come out. They bring the snow machine out. He wants it sprayed on the people in the front. It never works. He kind of becomes a theme, him apologizing for the failed snow machine throughout the show. But it almost sounds like the snow machine worked, only it just works on the audio. And so the show is here. You get a layer of just white, fuzzy, hissy snow up here, and then we're up here trying to listen to the show through the snow machine. That's the sound quality we have. Better than the Cleveland show for sure, but still a really frustrating listen. But there's some good stuff in here. At least we know there's some really good stuff in here. Opens up with Tush, Tush, Tush. Then we get a Stinkfoot that has a super aggressive solo in it. We get the countdown into New Year's. They do a brief run through of Auld Lang Syne. And then the really cool, like Frank's making some great set list choices here. We get an Inca Roads. When he starts his solo, it's got that really super watery psyche tone that just immediately puts you into some weird, trippy outer space mode. Crazy, frantic Inca energy. It's not like he's building this up to be this epic solo. Like he's hot. He's coming out hot in this solo. But the sound is rough, but you know the solo is fantastic. Lots and lots of energy. Doesn't really feel like your epic Inca Road solo, like, for example, the Helsinki solo from Stage 2 / One Size Fits All, as almost any Inca Road solo in 79, some in 88. It just feels rushed and aggressive, but still feels satisfying. If Frank was a user of recreational chemistry, I would think listening to this solo that, hey, It's New Year's. He's a little snowblind at this point. That's why it's so aggressive. But you can tell the energy's up for this New Year's event. Then we get another fantastic song choice. We get a Pygmy Twilight, the teenage version, as Frank says. Another super aggressive start to his solo. We get some weird 74 rhythm pockets in there. Fowler's back, so Frank can push those weird things, and Fowler's going to be right there with him. Super dynamic up and down solo. We get a nice little, kind of a slower hippie riff jam after we get the Mozart interlude. Not as quick as the previous hippie jam from, I think, the last time they played Pygmy Twilight, but a nice little almost like slow motion version of that with Frank dropping some solo in before we go into a room service. It's weird to hear room service this early in the show. It seems like it just necessarily feels better later in the show. This one is about a famous English pop star who is Deep Purple. That's who the famous English pop star is, Deep Purple. Frank has a lot of things to say about rock stars destroying rooms and throwing things in pools and doing things to groupies. And we're at the Chateau Marmont. Napoleon brings up a kidney a la Ruth for them to eat. Really strange little room service. That goes into Idiot Bastard Son. We're bringing back some deep cuts from earlier in the tour. The set list is fantastic, but it's the arrogant Dick Nixon version, talking about Richard Nixon, our president, who was, Watergate, shamefully had to leave office, all that kind of stuff. We don't get a cheapness, unfortunately, so we don't continue this awesome run of, songs that were played a lot early in the tour, but it's really nice to hear this. But then we get two new songs, the debut, the complete of like these songs that would drop on the One Size Fits All album, both of them with James Birdleg's Humans on guitar. Both of them have a middle section, which it seems like Humans might be playing a guitar solo. It's what it sounds like, but I'm really not sure because the sound is pretty rough. But we get a San Bernardino, which pretty much sounds fully complete, other than the fact that some of the lyrics are changed. We don't get the Johnny Guitar Watson rant at the end, that Baloo would do live in 77. We don't get that. But it's got some good energy. It pretty much sounds like a complete version of San Bernardino. And then that goes into Can't Afford No Shoes. And this, some of the lyrics are different, but it's got a different beginning. Like the beginning is like drums with just Nappy singing some lyrics, and then we go through some weird little start and stop type musical sections. Once we get to the chorus, we're kind of in where the song would be. But that first part, I think, is way more interesting than the officially released version. I'm not a fan of the officially released version. It is the reason the one size fits all is not in my top 10 of Frank Zappa albums, because I do not like Can't Afford No Shoes. It just ruins the flow of that album for me. I don't think it's a good song. That's my own personal issues. I'm seeing someone about that. Got a nice little boogie jam in the middle that I think Birdlegs is soloing over. I think this version just starts off better than the original one, but it's neat to hear these songs. So if it was a New Year's show and I was going to see Frank, do I want to hear two new songs? I don't know. I mean, as a tape collector going back on, oh, these are the debuts, this is fantastic. But maybe I wouldn't. I don't know. Then we get a Redunzel. And the Redunzel does not have that that really hyper intro. It just starts off right with a that like nice slow part. Really cool start. But then the tape cuts. And when we come back in on the show, we can share. We go right into that. So we miss Frank's whole solo. Ouch, that hurts. The Duke solo sounds pretty good. Duke's keys are kind of nice, kind of super funky. Some nice spacey energy there. Then we get a Dynamo Hum. Audience isn't really into it tonight, which is tracks for a Long Beach show. California people, we weren't into audience participation. It's a pretty laid back crew. We get a Camarillo Brillo, and then we get a really nice Montana. And I'm realizing as I'm listening to this Montana solo, which is your typical fall 74 Montana solo. It starts off kind of sounding like a 73 Montana solo. It feels funky. Is Humphreys on drums? He's not, but we got some of that sort of Humphreys, Chester funk that was around in like late 73. And then Frank just immediately downshifts and we go weird 74. You can tell Fowler's back. You get bursts of aggression. You get these great melodic ideas. You get these weird breakdowns. And then we get this really intense climax in which, in a way, it reminded me of the Grateful Dead's Barton Hall Morning Dew, where you just felt like they were going to drop back into the song and they just keep going and going and going. Not quite as epic as that, but a really fantastic Montana solo, even as I'm trying to listen to it through the snowy haze that covers this tape. And I'm realizing that if I had to pick an MVP for this tour, I think I'm going, it's either got to be Redunzel or Montana, but I'm going with Montana. I think solo per solo, if you were to compare them, there are more Redunzels than Montanas, but Montana delivers something interesting and fresh and new and exciting almost every time, if not every time. So now that we've reached the end of this leg of the tour, right now, who knows, it might change when we listen to the first two legs in years. Who knows when we'll get to that. I think Montana is the MVP of this tour. Then we get a George. He's playing the tambourine, not the finger cymbals. Don't know why. He's a jazz guy. He's from the jazz world, so he's going to play some jazz. A lot of talking again by Frank, which we don't need because of the sound. Some dramatic space, synthy interludes, lots of Ruth. They go into this interesting little jam towards the end that is definitely more reminiscent of like a 73 Humphreys-led Dupree's jam, where it's a little more proggy and angular and not really funky and in the pocket, but more like keeping you on the toes type thing. So it's a pretty interesting sort of George section. And then Dupree's Paradise is back, which had disappeared for like a month. Thank you for bringing it back one last time. We get the nappy solo, nice and slow and synth supported. Then we get some Fowler bass. We get some drums. We get an FC solo that is a real Zoot Allures type feel in the beginning, where he's just kind of sketching out some ideas, some chords. And then Chester comes in with just this plodding beat, and that kind of pushes off Frank into like a heavier vibe, kind of flirts with like some twisted Middle Eastern meets Tamershi Dween type weird angular lines that work really well. And then we go into this weird section where Chester is super busy on drums. Fowler, I think, from what I'm able to make out in the tape, is playing just these low, long, hanging, thick notes that kind of remind me of something O'Hearn would play when O'Hearn was a bass player in a couple years. Just these like boom, boom, and just setting up this blanket of just bass noise for Frank to sail over. So really interesting Dupree's. We go into Tush, and then for the encore, we get an awesome Oh No, Son of Orange County. I Just Can't Believe You Ate Four Dogs, Craig Pincus, and a fantastic end of the year, end of the tour, end of an era, closing More Trouble Every Day solo. It's weird, it's funky, it's all over the place. It's typically 74 and these random just excursions into places. If you're a Fish fan, you know how Fish does this with like their Run Like an Antelopes or their David Bowies or their Tweezers, where like you're going one direction and you make this hard right for like 12 bars and then you come back in and then you make a hard left for X number. I mean, it's got that vibe in a Zappa sense. It is an absolutely amazing closing solo. But I'm probably not ever going to listen to this again because it's a rough listen. This show is on YouTube, and there's the source I've seen has each song indexed. The sound is rough, but I recommend, if you want to check this out, just go straight to the Montana. Listen to the Montana, because the solo is absolutely worth checking out, even with the sound difficulties, and just sit through the last, it's like maybe 40, 45 minutes. Montana, George, Dupree's, Oh No, Into More Trouble. Just listen to that. Deal with the sound. Get your last little taste of the end of an era, how this era ended. If it were to be officially released, my understanding is they didn't record anything after Fowler broke his hand, so we don't have anything from the end of the tour. I would be surprised. I mean, I don't know why he wouldn't have recorded New Year's. It seems like Frank would always have recorded like a big event like New Year's, but apparently he didn't. But if he did, I think it would make a fantastic release. I mean, it just, what I'm able to hear, it all sounds fantastic. You got the two new songs. You got the comeback of all these songs Frank hadn't played in the tail end of the tour. So it's a frustrating listen, but you can tell it ends strong. You can tell there's some good stuff in here. It's just, man, yeah, it's just frustrating. Sucks that this tour, this absolutely fantastic tour, has to end with two of our worst sounding tapes. Where would I rank these? They're both at the bottom. Not the very bottom, only because that one at the very bottom is shorter and sounds equally bad as the one from Cleveland. But yeah, those bottom 4 or 5 shows are pretty much there for sound purpose reasons, just because the sound is unlistenable. That show at the top, that's still probably my all-time favorite Zappa show. This is my favorite tour. This is my favorite lineup. These are my favorite songs from Frank. That is my, probably, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't think any show is going to top that one for me for these years. But yeah, all right, that's not it for this tour for now, because we have 2 more legs to do. But I'm going to probably, I got a short tour I'm going to do next, but I'm going to probably hit something in the late 70s. I think I'm going to probably hit that winter 77 tour, just because it's not well represented in the live releases. We haven't got a full show from there. Might be a fun little deep dive. So that's probably my next 2. Not sure what I'm going to do after that. Open to suggestions. Don't suggest 82. 82 is probably not going to come for like 4 or 5 more tours. It's a big one. It's huge. It's epic. It's amazing. So we want to save the amazing stuff and space it out, not OD on the good stuff early, because then it's all downhill from there. But yeah, that's it. Yeah, Montana's the MVP of this tour at this point. I mean, once we get to those early things, maybe there's something that was so epic early it carried through. But a lot of the really epic songs, the Inca Roads, the Duprees, the Pygmies, Frank kind of dropped those out of rotation, for the last couple weeks of the tour, and kind of kept to the same set list. So, and Montana was always there and always delivering the goods. Good on you, Montana. Then you would disappear and come back without a guitar solo, except for once in '84. Frustrating, frustrating, frustrating. All right, that's all I got. Okay, there's more to that, but anyways, for the most part. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, share, comment. Let me know your thoughts on this tour, on this show, all that kind of stuff. You know how comments work, people. You know how comments work. And that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Peace. Talk to you later.